The wind howled across the red plains like a warning spoken too late, rattling the dry bones of the cottonwood trees and lifting dust into the sky where vultures circled without hurry. She hung there, small and pale against the vastness of the land, her bare feet swaying inches above the cracked earth. The rope bit into her wrists more than her neck. Someone had wanted her alive when they left her, wanted her to feel every second of fear. Around her neck hung a wooden board, roughly carved, the letters uneven and cruel. Indian land. Her blonde hair clung to her face with sweat and tears, and every breath burned her chest as if the air itself rejected her. She didn't know how long she'd been there. Time had become a blur of pain, heat, and prayer whispered to a God who felt very far away. She was called Emily Carter, though no one had spoken her name since morning. Her family's wagon had broken an axle near the river, just beyond what the maps called settled land. Her father had argued with the men who came out of nowhere, angry settlers drunk on fear and hatred, blaming every missing cow and burned fence on the Comanche. They had dragged Emily away while her mother screamed and her father bled into the dust. "This'll teach them," one man spat as they tied her up. "Mark the land. Let the savages see." Then they rode off, leaving silence behind like a curse. The sun climbed higher, merciless. Emily's lips cracked. Her vision darkened at the edges. She thought of her mother's hands brushing her hair at night, of the lullabies sung back east where trees were thick and rivers gentle. She thought she would die here, swinging between earth and sky, forgotten by everyone except the birds waiting patiently above. That was when the horse appeared. It came like a shadow sliding across the plain. Quiet, controlled, its rider upright and still. He wore no uniform, no badge, no mark of the towns beyond the horizon. His skin was darkened by sun and wind, his long black hair braided and tied with leather. He was Comanche and he was alone. His name was Tavok, though few remained alive who still spoke it with familiarity. Once he had ridden with a band, laughed around fires, planned hunts and futures. Now he traveled between worlds that rejected him, too Indian for the settlers, too changed for his own people. Tavok saw the girl before he saw the sign, saw the way her body sagged with exhaustion, the unnatural stillness of her fear. He reined his horse to a stop, eyes narrowing, not in hatred, but in recognition of something old and ugly. He dismounted slowly, scanning the land. No ambush, no men hiding, just cruelty left behind like a wound. When he stepped closer, Emily opened her eyes. Terror flooded her face. She had been taught what Indians were, monsters, killers, devils painted in blood. She tried to scream, but only a hoarse sound escaped her throat. Tavok read the fear instantly. He had seen it in mirrors made of white eyes and shaking hands all his life. He looked at the sign. His jaw tightened. He reached out and touched the rough wood, his fingers tracing the letters. A bitter smile crossed his face, not of pride, but of deep, tired anger. "This is not our way," he murmured in Comanche, though she could not understand the words. Without drama, without speeches, Tavok pulled out his knife. Emily sobbed, certain this was the end. But instead of pain, she felt relief, sudden, shocking, as the rope snapped and her weight collapsed into his arms. Tavok caught her before she hit the ground. She was light as a child, burning with fever, shaking violently. He cut the ropes from her wrists, removed the sign, and laid her gently in the shade of the tree. She stared up at him, confusion battling fear. He did not touch her more than necessary. He gave her water from his canteen, tilting it slowly to her lips. "Drink," he said in broken English, the word rough but careful. She drank, coughing, tears streaming down her face. "Why?" she whispered. "Why help me?" Tavok looked out across the land toward nothing and everything. "Because," he said quietly, "this land has seen enough hanging." The wind shifted. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled. And in that moment, two souls marked by other people's hatred took their first breath of a story neither of them could yet imagine. Emily did not remember falling asleep, only waking to warmth that wasn't pain. A fire crackled nearby, small and controlled, its smoke rising straight into the evening sky. She lay wrapped in a blanket that smelled of leather and sage. For a moment, panic returned. Then she saw Tavok sitting a short distance away, cleaning his knife, his movements slow and deliberate. He had placed space between them on purpose. She realized that before she even understood why. Night settled over the plains like a deep breath. Coyotes called in the distance. Emily's body ached, but she was alive, truly alive. She pushed herself up, wincing. Tavok noticed immediately. He handed her a piece of dried meat. "Eat," he said. "You need strength." She hesitated, then took it. Hunger overcame fear. As she ate, she watched him. The scars on his hands, the sadness in his eyes that had nothing to do with her. "They said you would kill me," she said softly. Tavok nodded once. "They say many things." Over the next days, they traveled slowly. Emily could not walk far, so Tavok adjusted his pace without complaint. He showed her how to drink from streams safely, how to wrap her wrists to prevent infection. At night, he spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. She learned that he had lost his wife and son to a sickness brought by traitors, that his band had scattered, broken by war and treaties written in languages they did not own. Emily spoke of her family, her fear that they were dead. Tavok listened. He did not promise what he could not give. But when riders appeared on the horizon one afternoon, armed men searching, he hit her without hesitation, covering her tracks, risking his life for someone the world said he should hate. In time, Emily understood the truth that no sign could ever tell. Monsters were not born from skin or names, but from cruelty left unchallenged. Tavok did not save her because she was white. He saved her because she was human. When they finally reached a trading post near the edge of settled land, Emily turned to him, tears in her eyes. "What will happen to you?" she asked. Tavok looked back toward the open plains. "I will keep walking," he said. "This land still knows my name." She reached out, took his hand. A simple act, a powerful one. And as she walked toward her future, Emily knew she would spend her life telling the truth that the loneliest Comanche she ever met was the reason. She lived it all. Emily stayed at the edge of the trading post longer than she meant to, her fingers clenched in the worn fabric of the blanket Tavok had given her, watching his figure grow smaller against the open land until the horizon swallowed him whole. And only then did she realize that being saved was not the same as being finished with fear, because the world she was walking back into was the same one that had left her hanging, and the weight of that truth pressed on her chest harder than the rope ever had. The men at the post stared when they saw her, dirty, bruised, alive when rumor had already buried her, and questions fell from their mouths like stones, each one sharp and careless, asking who had done this, who had taken her, who had touched her. And when she told them the truth, when she said a Comanche had cut her down and carried her through the plains, the room shifted in a way she could feel, even before the words landed, disbelief curdling into suspicion, then anger, because her story did not fit the one they needed to tell themselves to sleep at night. They sent for the sheriff, and the sheriff sent riders, and before Emily could understand what she had started, the land itself seemed to rise with hooves and rifles, a hunting party born not of justice but of wounded pride. She tried to speak again, to explain that Tavok had harmed no one, that he had saved her life, but her voice was small in a room full of men who had already chosen their ending, and as she was reunited with her mother, alive, broken, clinging to Emily as if the world might steal her again at any moment, Emily felt a new kind of terror take root, one that had nothing to do with ropes or trees and everything to do with guilt, because somewhere out there, walking alone beneath the same sky, was the man who had saved her, and now he was being hunted for it. Tavok sensed it before he saw it, the change in the wind, the way birds lifted too suddenly, the distant thunder that was not thunder at all but men riding with purpose. And he did not run because running would confirm the lie they carried, but he did turn toward the hills, toward ground he knew, toward memory carved into stone and soil, and as night fell, the first shot cracked the darkness open, then another, and the old scars in his body burned as if they remembered every wound they had ever received. He moved like water through the land, slipping between rocks and ravines, his breath steady even as the past came rushing back, his father cut down under a white flag, his son coughing himself into silence, treaties signed with smiles and broken with bullets, and when the riders finally cornered him near a dry arroyo, shouting his name as if it were a crime, Tavok stood his ground, lifting his empty hand slowly, not in surrender but in refusal to become what they wanted him to be. And in that moment, as rifles leveled and hatred found its aim, a single voice cut through the night, sharp and shaking and unmistakably human, shouting his name not as an accusation but as a truth. Emily, riding hard into the circle of guns, Her hair loose, her face pale but unafraid, placing herself between Tavok and death because some debts are heavier than fear. She told them what they had done, what had really happened, how she had been left to die by their own, how the sign had been a lie nailed to a child, and though some men looked away and others tightened their grips, something cracked in the space between them, a silence where the old story faltered, and Tavok looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. Not sorrow, not anger, but something like wonder mixed with grief, because he knew the cost of standing there, knew that even if he lived, the land would never forget this night. In the end, it was not mercy that saved him, but hesitation, the fragile pause that comes when a lie is exposed too brightly to ignore, and the riders backed away one by one, muttering, retreating into the darkness they had brought with them, leaving Tavok and Emily standing beneath a sky full of stars that seemed suddenly very close. And when Emily finally let herself breathe, she understood that survival was not the end of the story, only the beginning of the responsibility it carried. Tavok spoke her name once softly, as if sealing it into the land, then turned away again, because some roads must be walked alone. But this time Emily did not feel abandoned, because she knew that what he had given her could not be taken back. Not her life, not the truth, and not the courage to tell it. And if this chapter moved you, the days after the night in the arroyo did not bring peace, only a quieter kind of war. One fought in looks that lingered too long and whispers that followed. Emily wherever she went, because a girl who returned from the edge of death with a story that challenged men's pride was more dangerous than any rifle. And though her mother held her close and thanked God aloud for the miracle of her survival, the town itself recoiled, unsure what to do with a truth that made them complicit. And Emily felt that distance keenly as she healed, her wrists scarring over while her heart refused to, the image of Tavok standing alone beneath, the stars replaying in her mind until sleep became a stranger. The sheriff never apologized, not with words, but he did call off the search officially, claiming there had been a misunderstanding, and that thin, cowardly phrasing hardened something inside Emily, because she understood now that evil often wore the mask of mistakes, and she began to speak where she had once stayed silent, telling anyone who would listen what had happened, writing letters to newspapers that might never print them, insisting that the men who had left her hanging be named, even as doors closed and faces turned away. Tavok, meanwhile, did not go far, though the land pulled at him like it always had, because the past had a way of circling back, and he felt the weight of unfinished things pressing him toward the river valley, where his people once gathered, a place now claimed by fences and paper. And when he returned there, he found not peace but memory, ghost laughter in the wind, the echo of drums replaced by the creak of wire. And standing there, he made a choice he had avoided for years, to stop drifting, to stand somewhere long enough to be seen. Trouble found him quickly, as it always did, in the form of two settlers arguing over water rights, one accusing the other of stealing, both looking at Tavok like he was already guilty. And when words turned into fists and then into knives, Tavok stepped between them, disarming one, restraining the other, refusing to let blood spill on ground already soaked in it. And though he saved them both, gratitude did not follow. Only fear and the promise of stories told wrong. Those stories reached the town just as Emily was preparing to leave it, her decision made in the quiet of a dawn, where she realized that staying meant shrinking, and shrinking meant letting the lie win. And when she packed what little she had and told her mother she needed to go west to testify at the territorial office, to put her story on record where it could not be buried as gossip, her mother wept but did not stop her, because she saw in Emily's eyes the same fire that once drove families across oceans and plains. Fate, or something like it, brought Emily and Tavok back into the same space when her wagon was ambushed, along the river road by the very men who had left her hanging, their faces twisted by desperation now that rumors had begun to circle. And as they dragged her from the wagon, blaming her for the trouble, Tavok appeared from the trees like the land itself rising up, his presence freezing them mid-step, because fear recognizes its own reflection. And this time Emily did not hang in silence. She spoke loudly, clearly, naming them, daring them to finish what they had started. And when Tavok stood beside her, not in front, not behind, but equal, the men broke, fleeing into the brush like cowards chased by their own shadows. In the aftermath, Emily and Tavok sat by the river as the sun dipped low, the water carrying away dust and blood alike, and for the first time Tavok told her the full truth of his losses. of the nights he dreamed of a son who would never grow, of a wife whose voice still guided him. And Emily listened not as a girl who had been saved, but as a woman learning what it meant to bear witness. And when she told him she was going to testify, to stand before men who had never seen her hang and tell them what their laws had done, Tavok nodded because he understood that courage took many forms. And sometimes the bravest path led straight into rooms built to deny you. They parted again at dawn, not with sorrow but with resolve, both carrying something of the other now, something that made them stronger and more vulnerable all at once. And as Emily rode toward her future and Tavok turned back toward the land, the distance between them felt less like separation, and more like a bridge, one built from truth and choice. And if this chapter stirred something in you,